let's talk about the future of college sports in the NCAA. Now, as part of the House versus NCAA settlement is starting to really kind of emerge out there, there is going to be some very, very interesting changes when it comes to college sports, most notably in the form of expanded roster sizes. Now, roster sizes are set to expand in all sports, but it also gives each school an opportunity to fund all those roster slots with a full scholarship. Remember, back in the yesteryear of the NCAA, baseball, for example, they've had 11.6 scholarships to dole out to 35 to 40 guys on a baseball roster. Under the new parameters established in the House versus NCAA settlement, which, by the way, is still not finalized, but it very much looks like it's close to being finalized by the lawyers involved, that will expand the roster size for baseball in the case of BYU and Division I programs from it'll get rid of the scholarship limit. What I mean by that is that the 11.6 scholarships they've had to dole out are going away. Instead, you'll now have a maximum roster size of 34 players. You, speaking of BYU or any other institution out there, could reward all 34 of those players with a full scholarship, or you could expand out your official scholarship to 20 scholarships, etc. The biggest change here is that each of these roster sizes no longer has a set number of scholarships attached to it. It's all about the number of guys or girls, or women, I should say, on your roster. You can reward them with full scholarships or no scholarships. It's up to the respective institutions, but it is expanding the field to have upwards of 700 new scholarships on an annual basis for NCAA sports. It's going to be really interesting to see how universities absorb this and how they're able to fund those extra scholarships. When it comes to BYU, I see this as a major opportunity for BYU. I know there are a number of you, I mentioned baseball earlier on, who are huge baseball fans and want to see BYU baseball become a bigger force in the Big 12 and just be a bigger force in college baseball overall. If BYU, in theory, decides to go from 11.6 scholarships in baseball to offering full ride scholarships to all 34 roster slots they will have allotted to them, that is going to go a long way to helping BYU baseball be far more competitive. The other issue is that every other program out there they're competing against will also have that same opportunity. So you will see a number of high-level baseball programs continuing to be dominant forces because they have those full ride scholarships. But BYU, using baseball as an example, could make themselves a differentiator by allowing BYU coaches, in the case of BYU baseball, to go out and offer all 34 of the roster guys a full scholarship. That will expand the opportunity to bring in higher talent to BYU. It's a similar case in the case of, you look at gymnastics, you look at volleyball. Volleyball scholarships are set to go up. I think it's like 6 for men right now to 18 roster spots that in theory could be full ride scholarships. You could see BYU really expand their opportunities when it comes to getting better talent into the various sports at BYU by giving full ride scholarships. Now, that's going to require millions more in terms of the overall dollars allotted to scholarships if you want to do this, but it's a huge opportunity for BYU if they continue to want to have one of those more robust college athletic departments across the board. Well, the way to do it now is do a lot, and they're saying somewhere between $7 and $15 million to round out all those full scholarships if you want to have that. And oh, by the way, there's this other thing that's coming out with House versus NCAA is beginning next year, there will be revenue sharing from BYU and other institutions between $20 and $22 million annually that'll be doled out to BYU's athletes. Now, the issue is that obviously are subject to Title IX restrictions. You will see an even split, at least in theory, 50% of that money going to male athletes and 50% going to female athletes. And I do wonder how that's going to affect the overall bottom line for BYU to have potentially $7 to $15 million in extra scholarship costs, in addition to having to dole out between $20 and $22 million. And the additional thing is going into future years, by the end of the 10-year process that this current House versus NCAA settlement has, is that allotment that's being doled out to athletes could expand to as high as $33 million annually. BYU is going to have to come up with some extra cash very quickly, or change some of the ways they go about funding different things to find this money, because that's not an insignificant amount of money. There have been many, many years that $33 million alone would have been a third, if not more, of BYU's total athletic budget. Now, going into the Big 12, the Cougars have absolutely expanded that budget. They're making more money than ever. So obviously they have the means to continue to add at a pretty even pace. But this is a big opportunity for BYU to really make a name for themselves on the NCAA circuit. Now, are they going to be able to dole out, like I said, full scholarships to every single roster slot that's now allotted to them year one? Maybe not. But if I'm Tom Holmoe, I'm any of the other BYU administrators out there, and if I'm a coach at BYU, speaking of any team out there, you're absolutely asking for as many full ride scholarships as you can get to recruit with. The other change also is going to reduce BYU football's allotment. The roster size will go from what is currently 123 players. You have 85 scholarship spots, but you have 123 roster spots for BYU football to 105 roster slots. Could BYU be on the hook for an extra 20 full ride football scholarships? Yeah, I believe they will and should be on the hook for that. But the issue is, where are the walk-ons going to go? BYU, along with a number of other high-level football programs, would and will not be where they have been without having walk-ons who have come in and really made a name for themselves. For every standout player that comes in as a scholarship athlete and becomes a star, there are an equal number, it feels like, of guys who started as a no-name walk-on who emerged and became star players. Think of Dax Milne as a preferred walk-on from Bingham High School. Many thought that Braden Cosper was the star jewel of that recruiting cycle, and Dax Milne decided to come to BYU as a walk-on. Well, nothing against Braden Cosper, but Dax Milne is now going into his fourth year in the NFL, whereas Braden Cosper was beset by injuries during his entire career as a Cougar. You need to have an allotment for walk-ons. You got to find a way around that when it comes to the settlement, because doing away with walk-ons, especially in football, but even more so for other sports, doesn't seem like the right way for the NCAA to go about this. But then again, when has the NCAA really done anything other than enrich themselves at the expense of the student athlete? That's another question for another day and another topic for another day. But some crazy times are ahead. But looking at it overall, this is a huge opportunity for BYU athletics to really stand out, I think, if they can find a way to fund as many full ride scholarships and as quickly as possible going into the 2025 season, obviously a year from now. You got 365 days, give or take a few, to figure this out. Start hitting up boosters. Start allotting cash from those media rights deals from the Big 12. Start earmarking other things that you can find ways to generate the cash necessary to differentiate yourselves and give these full ride scholarships to these various programs. If you can do that, it is going to allow BYU athletics to continue to be one of those more well-rounded athletics programs, athletic departments, I should say, in all of college sports, which they have obviously been known for quite a while now. But at the same time, you got to have the money to do that. There are a number of high-level programs out there who are already budgeting for this, finding ways to cut back in different departments to allot the cash for it. And BYU, I believe, will be no different, but it may be a little different on BYU's timeline, because we all know that BYU doesn't just go into debt for anything, and they rarely go into debt, period, when it comes to BYU athletics. But this is something that BYU is going to have to find a way to fund very, very quickly.